I'm filming this on a Zenfone 6 because the camera swivels 180 degrees, thus allowing a forward-facing camera to be the main camera. And there's an interesting phenomena with the Zenfone, which is that from time to time, it doesn't capture the microphone. And I keep this camera in airplane mode and have done so for some time. And it's frustrating to get midway into a video and then notice it's not recording audio. So I updated the system, downloaded a 900 megabyte system update, etc., and put it back into airplane mode in the hope that this will increase reliability in microphone capture. Now, since that update, with Bluetooth disconnected, with Wi-Fi disconnected, in airplane mode, this little transmitter, which is a GE transmitter that controls remote outlets that I use to turn on and turn off all of my lights with a single button, now turns the phone on. It's a remarkable thing. In complete airplane mode, that a small radio device can actually turn my phone on. I noticed this when I arrived home to record, and the battery of the phone was 0. And I said, that's interesting. I turned the phone off. How could the battery be at 0 when it had 100% charge? Then I turned off the lights at the end of a video after turning the Zenfone off again. And it turned right back on. And in this camera mode, which it launches automatically, the screen does not go off. I've used this setting in the camera mode to say that the phone screen will stay on. That's so I can watch myself recording until I manually turn the phone off, which I do after every video. It's just that one button with a little RF remote turns the phone back on, launches the camera, and leaves the screen on until the battery is drained. Now, this ties into a larger pattern of data gathering, outside control, breaches in security, and the like, that our governments have been perpetrating in tension with the rights of the individual. In China, we see it at the most extreme. In China, there is facial recognition such that if you jaywalk across a street, meaning no cars are coming, you don't want to wait till you get to a sidewalk, and so you hop across the street, the surrounding cameras will capture and say, who's that person, and recognize them. The recognition from facial recognition then goes to the bank account of that individual. And the Chinese government extracts a penalty for jaywalking right out of the bank account on the phone, and the person gets a little update. You have just been fined 100 won for walking across the street without a sidewalk, and it has been deducted from your account. This is the dream of every totalitarian state, to be all-knowing, all-seeing, all-doing. Why wouldn't it be the dream? It is the Western version of God, a God that in the ancient time was punitive, insane, barbaric, sociopathic, always angry about something, and filled with righteous indignation, that the children would do what they wanted to do rather than what the parents demanded that the children do for their own good. Of course, the sociopathic, domineering parental model of the masculine parent, of the father, who must be obeyed at all cost, is originating from the reptilian brain. The fear-based, trauma-based fight, flight, freeze protocol, in which you run from something bigger than you and attack and dominate something smaller than you, including your children, including your people, stems from the reptilian brain. It stems from fear. Fear of past pains repeating themselves in the future. Fear of the helplessness within past pains repeating itself in the future, such that the most important thing to ensure for a reptilian brain is never to lose control, to be obeyed. And so you see this odd dynamic in grown children who seek a new parent, a bigger parent, to take care of them. And the grown parents on a sociopathic continuum who, for your own good, passed laws on housing. In my county, in Marin, in the United States, it is virtually illegal to build a house for less than $600,000. If you buy the cheapest piece of land and follow every law relating to that land and build the smallest house that you are legally allowed to build, in my case it's 1,200 square feet, meaning it is illegal to build a house less than 1,200 square feet, and pay the market rate of $600 to $1,200 per square foot. If you do that, it will cost at least $600,000 to build your home. Now, it's also illegal to build your house immediately, because if you follow all the plans and protocols and submit plans, it will take anywhere from 9 months to 5 or even 10 years to get legal permission to build your own house on your own land for your own good, or for the good of the community. That was the rationale at the local civic center as to why I couldn't build the house I wanted to build. They said, it's not good for the neighborhood. The neighborhood. Well, I had good news for them. I had interviewed each of my neighbors before buying the land. I had talked about the way that the development of the land would be beneficial to the neighborhood. And the neighborhood, the actual neighbors, were supportive. They would sign a contract or a paper that day saying they welcomed this development in the actual neighborhood. And that's when I learned that the actual neighbors in the actual neighborhood were not as important as the idea of a neighborhood and the idea of neighbors as developed by my friendly civic center, by my friendly government. And they said, it doesn't actually matter what your neighbors want. It doesn't matter what you want. What matters is our idea of what you should want, of what is good for the neighbors and the neighborhood in the abstract. And here's a very large booklet which outlines what is in fact good for your neighborhood, whether you want it or not, whether your neighbors want it or not. And the fee of $30,000 compensates us for enforcing our plan for your neighborhood, for your own good and for the good of your neighbors, whether they want that or not. Sounds a little bit like our parents. You will go to school and learn calculus for your own good, whether you want to or not. You will do this and do this. You will read these books and not these books for your own good, whether you want to or not. You will consume these numbers of items and think like this and not like this for your own good, whether you want it or not. Your democratic rights will be invaded for your own good if you happen to lean in the direction that your government has decided is a threat. We are going to bomb an entire country in Vietnam for your own good. To counteract the communist threat, we will have a witch hunt for your own good in your own country, breaking every democratic law in the book for your own good, to root out any idea of communism for your own good. Burning men, women, children, and an entire planet alive, setting fire to the earth's lungs for your own good, to mimic, perhaps, the ingestion of tobacco, which never did anyone any harm, according to the government, for your own good, until it did. Then you must be banned for your own good from smoking here or here or here for your own good. You must not wear masks. You must wear masks for your own good. You must listen to the government. Well, Julian Assange and Edward Snowden are fugitives from the United States for telling the truth. News is fine as long as it does not contain any information that embarrasses your friendly government official for your own good. Media organizations must be recategorized as independent terrorist states so that media can be silenced for your own good. The sensitive child must be relabeled as a troublemaker and a black sheep for your own good, so that the parents' hypocrisy, whether it's the lack of Christian values or the doing of the exact opposite of the family dogma, for your own good. Alice Miller must be reclassified as a renegade, psychiatrist and psychologist, to maintain the status quo, must be derided for speaking the truth. The minority position, be it in race, be it in ideas, be it in gender, the deviant from the status quo must be categorically rebranded as a villain to persecute homosexuality, to discredit natural health techniques, to humiliate those who believe in a higher power, to mock and isolate those who have experiences with extraterrestrial, with the other, with consciousness or energy patterns that doesn't fit within the dogma of the status quo, that by definition is too large to be measured by a scientific paradigm that is set up to measure things smaller than themselves. How can you measure a universe that doesn't fit into a laboratory within a laboratory? How can you develop new and alternate ways of thinking within the lab of existing dogma? How can you measure or track anomalous events? You see, in the study of cycles, Dewey outlined that everything had a cycle. And every cycle has a rhythm in time. Now, if we study something for 1 second, and it has a millisecond cycle, we can say that every millisecond, reliably, this happens. If you study something for a minute, and it has a second cycle, you can say reliably that 60 times out of the past minute, it has done this at regular intervals. We understand the cycle. If you study something for an hour, and it has a minute cycle, you can say reliably that every 60 seconds, it will do this again and again and again. If you study something for a month and it has a weekly cycle, you can say every 7 days it does this, and then in 7 days it does this, and in 7 days it does this. It has a cycle. If you study something for 10,000 years, and every 10 years it has a cycle. It does this, and then 10 years later it does this, and 10 years later it does this. You can say, by Jove, we understand the cycle. If you study something for 200 million years, and every 100 million years it does this, and in another 100 million years it does this, in another 100 million years it does this, it completes the circle. That's what a cycle is. Everything is part of the most graceful shape in the universe, a circle. The circle goes down, disappears from view, comes up, disappears from view, comes down, and every cycle has a different rhythm in time. The breath and the release. Well, what we're talking about is breath on an infinite continuum of rhythms. What we're talking about is something vastly bigger than the cycle of human thought, than the cycle of human consciousness, than the cycle of the human body. That in order to exist, in order for us to have the humility to say it just might be there, whether we want it to or not, whether we can control it or not, whether it fits into our dogma or not, it just might be there in a rhythm that goes on, whether we acknowledge its existence or not. We used to think the earth was the center of everything, and that the only cycles were things moving around the earth, which moved around us, which moved around our idea of God, which moved around our felt experience in a patriarchy of a domineering father, which in ecological terms, with a male body being bigger, more aggressive, and more competent at warfare than a female body. If you want to test this out, take 1,000 random women and 1,000 random men and give them the assignment of killing one another, and more men, statistically speaking, will be alive at the end of that combat than women. Thus, in a sociopathic paradigm, where survival consists in a fight, flight, freeze dynamic, the women and children will run or freeze. The male will fight. And there will be a subservient cult emerging that honors, in the most basic human need to survive and feel secure in that survival, the dominance of the male body, until such time as thinking, communicating, and feeling are more fundamental to survival and security than brute physical force, a time we live in today. One's quality of relationships, one's ability to survive, to thrive, to have a sense of love and belonging, to meet one's human needs, to develop self-esteem, depend more on one's thinking and feeling technology, more on one's communication technique than it does on brute physical force. But in the long memory of a species, we still honor the muscular male and female who must now go to a gym to artificially take up time and tax their muscles in order to gain rank in an old memory that has little to do with survival today. Today, survival has a lot to do with information, with asymmetries and symmetries in transparency, in exposure. And so the deep state, the archetypal father, is going within in the chronicles of Edward Snowden, large segments of the taxes that are extracted under pain of death, seizure, and imprisonment, meaning you have to pay your taxes so that the government can do things with your money for your own good. If you do not believe that the government will do a better job spending your money for your own good, then you will. You are, of course, free not to pay your taxes until your house is taken, until you are arrested, until you are villainized in the community for breaking the law. And if you are bold enough to resist such seizure and defend your property or body, this is a much more serious crime. You see, the abused and violated child who is compelled by the parent to do something they do not want to do initially resists the large giant that is the parent by saying no. The parent decides you're going to wake up at this time of day. The parent decides you're going to go to school. The parent decides you are going to eat this broccoli if it's the last thing you do for your own good. And the child says, no. I want to do it my own way. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I hate these clothes. I don't want to cut my hair. The giant boxes the little one in the ear, pulls that ear, hits the child, humiliates the child. The parent demonstrates a sociopathic capacity to traumatize that infant, that child, into grief, into rage, into suffering, into terror, into running, into freezing, into agreeing with the parent. And once submission has been obtained, the child now looks to the parent. The child sees something exciting and wants to run over and see it, but they turn in fear, mentally or physically, to the pattern of the dominant authority, to the pattern of the larger energy, and says, will I get in trouble? Will I be hated? Will I be hurt? Will I be humiliated for going and doing the thing that I desire? For being free? Will I stand out in the neighborhood? And if the child determines that they will be hit, or may be hit, or may be hated, or may be shamed or humiliated, or glared at, whatever the various punishment might be, the child gives up on what they want. The child gives up on who they want to be. The child surrenders their freedom in their body to do what they are told to do by the giant who will take away life unless they comply. The giant that's going to do what they're going to do for your own good. whether you like it or not, whether you have a good reason, whether or not there have been other ways of doing things in the past, whether or not there will be more sophisticated ways to do things in the future, whether or not they're doing that on the other side of the planet, or over in Iceland, or over in Denmark, or Australia, or Thailand, regardless of what's going on over there, past, present, or future, regardless of what will go on in this family over here, you will do what the parent says to do, or you will be disowned, as is the case of many autocratic parents. You had the audacity to marry the person you were in love with, not the parent approved of by the father. We're never going to speak to you again. You had the audacity to study the degree you wanted to study. You went to school, we made you do that, but it wasn't good enough. You didn't study the things you were supposed to study. No inheritance for you. No praise for you when you get home. That's reserved for your brother, who did what he was told. And what was he told? Generally, it's the cult. The cult likes doctors and lawyers. The cult likes people with lots of money. Do doctors and lawyers benefit the planet? Do doctors and lawyers change the ecology from overheating? Do doctors and lawyers take pollutants out of the atmosphere? It doesn't matter. This cult likes doctors and lawyers. So be one. Or don't get talked about at the dinner table for your own good, or perhaps for ours. So we have an interesting world where apps, one after another. I tried to put Outlook, Microsoft's email program, on my phone. It would not allow me to install Outlook on my phone unless I gave the control of my microphone to Microsoft. Bad enough, right? That wasn't good enough for Microsoft. It would not let me put Outlook on my phone unless I gave Microsoft the legal authority to start and turn on my phone when Microsoft chose to do so. Will you allow this program to access all your contacts? No. The contacts that I want to use to send an email are adequate. Will you allow Outlook to access your microphone? Now that's an odd one, isn't it? How often do you have telephone calls through your email program? No. About capture video when the program wishes to capture video or look through your photographs. If you will not allow us to turn your phone on and off, to have access to your microphone and your video camera, we will not let you use our program to send your emails. Are they permissions or are they bullying? You see, it's an interesting thing. Do you trust the patriarchal father? Do you trust the government? It's the same question. Do you trust Microsoft to protect your data the software company that put in so many back doors for the American intelligence agencies and for advertisers and for Microsoft colleagues and Microsoft. So many back doors in security in its programs that just about any hacker in the world can cause you misery and grief and destroy and corrupt your computer, thanks to Microsoft, would like the ability to turn your phone on and off at will, access your camera, etc. at will, so that it can sell it to the new parent in town. A mob boss, the Russians, your friendly CIA, someone to violate you again without your permission for your own good. And the child that never grows up to become an adult is the citizen that never grows up to become an adult. The child that learns that asking, why are you going into Mary's room at 2 a.m.? Why is she crying every Thursday when mom's away? The child that has the audacity to ask that question at breakfast is frozen with hostility out of the conversation, is hit, humiliated if necessary, for bringing the shadow nature of the sociopath in the family system to light. The little kid who tells the public, your government is corrupting the integrity of Apple, Google, and Microsoft and all of the cellular networks to spy on Americans without warrant against the law, is hounded as they flee across the globe and takes refuge in Russia for our own good, right? We want Edward Snowden in Russia, don't we? Well, the trial cannot be public if Edward Snowden comes back home. The trial cannot be public. And the jury will be denied the right to hear why Edward Snowden went against Dad and told the truth to the other children who mostly didn't want to know, because Dad is all powerful, Dad is all knowing, Dad is all doing. And if we just do what Dad says, if we just accept Dad's version of reality for our own good, we will be allowed to live. We will be allowed to survive. We will not be beaten by the giant that broke our spirits when we were 2 years old. We will not be hit by the addict who felt threatened in their loss of control. We will not see the monster that went into little Jenny's room at 6 years old. All of it can be kept silent and secret. The rape and murder of Vietnamese women with infants, the burning of the earth's skin for Christian and important social and ideological values for our own good cannot and will not be questioned. Asus, Android, has a download for your own good. If you want your camera to work, update your phone. Only now, with all radio frequency in airplane mode, with all interconnectivity turned off, the phone turns on, the camera turns on, the battery drained. With a 20-year-old technology. How convenient for your government who wishes to spy on you without a warrant. To be able to go up and down the street, bing, bing, let's see what's going on in these houses. Let's open the camera. Make sure the phone doesn't turn off. Let's see what our children are doing. Are they behaving? Are they doing things the way they should be doing things, the way they were done before? Or are they deviants? Are they deviating from standard protocol? It doesn't matter that standard protocol is destroying the Earth's lungs or yours. It doesn't matter that standard protocol is creating an obesity or a suicide epidemic, either in our landfills or in our bodies. It doesn't matter that standard protocol is leading to the consumption of more energy per capita than any cult in human history. With less felt enjoyment to show for it. It's a good symptom of something being a little bit off. When energy consumption goes through the roof and felt human well-being deteriorates, mentally, emotionally, and physically, something's a little bit odd there. If you go from a cheap $100 TV to a $50,000 TV and your viewing experience deteriorates, becomes more erratic, if you update a gigabyte program and suddenly your phone won't hold a battery charge, if you download Apple's latest app only to discover that the battery life of your phone, without your permission, deteriorates markedly at around the time their new phone comes out, which they wish you to spend another $1,000 to buy, it's a little bit suspicious. But you can't question Apple. You can't question the CIA. You can't question your parents. You can't question the 5% of pedophilic priests, which were sanctioned for hundreds of years by punishing the victims. We can't let women's voices be heard around sexual abuse. And we certainly cannot allow our minorities, be they homosexuals, be they African Americans, be they Asians, to be treated with the same decency, quote unquote, as their Caucasian counterparts. In a game where the giant, the majority, the bigger one, violates the smaller one because they can in a sociopathic paradigm, because they can.